Legends has been around for ages, being rebranded and reconfigured into things like Legion, Cyberverse Commander, Scout, and now Core Class. After a dry period of about 2 years of no Legend scale toys from Hasbro, Core Class came back in Kingdom to give us some absolute bangers. And Megatron, who's just alright. But then with Legacy, Core Class has kind of started off alright? Yes, I know Hot Rod was in Kingdom, but he was intended for Legacy initially, so I'm calling him a Legacy Core, plus this is the Legacy version. There's no discernible difference between the two, except for the packaging, but I don't care. Of Wave 1, I chose to buy 2 so far, and Iguanus is the best core between both Kingdom and Legacy so far, whereas Hot Rod kinda sucks. Iguanus is based off an old Pretender, and the fusion between shell and transforming figure here is pretty good. Makes me very excited for Skullgrin. The paintwork, color distribution, choice of actual colors, it all helps him stand out and look cohesive. The tooling on this guy is awesome too. The head looks superb and there's a lot to look at on this figure. It's not boring in the slightest. Weapon though is, well, it's for combining, so it doesn't look that great, but you can kind of use it as this little cannon thing. I don't really like the way it looks, to be completely honest. It's painted nicely though. I do wish he was a deluxe like Skullgrin. I don't know, it feels weird having the Pretenders as different sizes. Either that or I wish Skullgrin was a core, because it just would have made the collection fit better together in my eyes. Kind of like how all the Pretenders in Power of the Primes were all the same size. It would have been nice if they were like that here too, at least to me. The backpack they added to the shell does look very nice and makes the whole thing feel more like a Transformer to me. I love seeing a bit of the alt mode on the robot because it just helps you feel like it transforms into a thing. And the original Pretender shell doesn't have any of that because it's literally just a shell, so I like that inclusion here. Hot Rod, however, looks kind of stinky. His proportions are off, the tooling isn't nearly as good, paint looks nice, but the separation and distribution is also not nearly as good. There's a lot of empty red on this guy, and it just makes the details feel so lost. And those proportions, what is happening? I do love how the back wing looks on this guy though, sticking out of the top there, it looks quite nice, and the yellow is a really vibrant yellow, so that just works. I also like the added silver for the exhausts on the sides. The kibble, it's not as nice as Iguanus. There's a lot of it on the legs and it really hampers the figure. The thighs are also super small, making it look even more wonky when you go to bend the knee or whatever, because he's like Age of Extinction Galvatron where his knees are at his hips. His sword I've seen compared to well, a penis. And it looks weird. However, I love the inclusion of Allspark Blue. That's a really nice touch. I like that little callback to that old color they used to use a lot. I don't have Skywarp salad tongs, so I can't complete the weapon, and honestly it doesn't really feel worth it because Hot Rod at core class price here, which is $17, does not feel worth it. Posing on Iguanus is great for his size. He's basically all ball joints, and that allows for you to make him super expressive. The only thing that feels like a downer is the head. The way the sculpt is done around the neck kind of makes all of his spiky bits get in the way when you're trying to move the head, so you can't really make that look super expressive, but the rest of the toy is quite nice. Hot Rod though is very awkward. His shoulders do the trigger happy thing, which I don't like. They are all super stiff. His elbows are like down at his wrists like Armada sideways. His knees are very high up and his legs like to come apart all the time. It's just not a fun experience trying to pose Hot Rod. He also doesn't have a waist joint. Transforming Iguanus is clever and interesting. It's definitely a conversion I haven't seen before, and that makes it a lot more satisfying to complete. Hot Rod though feels very generic and likes to get in its own way a lot. The windshield thing doesn't tab in on my copy and the spoiler tends to fall off because the peg is loose. I know how to fix it, it's just annoying. Iguanus' alt mode though is definitely not something to write home about. I really wish he had handlebars. He looks so weird without the handlebars. For this size, it's fine, I guess, with all the limbs hanging off of him, but they do get distracting. It's still a better alt mode for me than the original in my eyes, but it's strange. It's just a robot in a yoga pose. The color distribution on this mode feels a lot more messy and it's full of gaps, so if that's something that bothers you, then it will really bother you here. What bothers me is the lack of a kickstand too. I really wish he had a kickstand. He can stand fine on his rectangularly like shaped wheels, like the you know what I mean, but it's not great. I still wish he had a kickstand. Hot Rod though is actually a neat little car. I just wish the roof tabbed in on mine. His car looks a lot like Hot Rod would, and I quite like that. The shaping and the colors work. I just wish there was an Autobot badge on the front there. Even with the sword stored on the top, it doesn't look that bad. This part is definitely the better mode of the figure. Paintwork is still not anything to write home about, but it's a lot better than the robot mode. So how are these legacy cores? Right, like at the end of the day, how are they? Each one has some ups and downs for me, some more so than others. Hot Rod. And inflation also really didn't help Hot Rod whatsoever with his price to figure ratio. I think is terrible, but I think Iguanus is definitely a worthy pickup for sure. Even if you don't really have any attachment to the character or the Pretenders in general, you don't really need that to enjoy this figure because it's just nice to mess with. And then if you have no attachment to the character, buying the toy, and if you end up liking the toy, will then make you research the character, and then you'll have an attachment to it. So I like that. I had no care or interest for Iguanus until I bought this toy, and now I care about the character. Just goes to show you what that does to you. Hot Rod though, if he goes on clearance, then I would say pick him up. If not, I honestly would say avoid it unless you absolutely must either complete Legacy Wave 1 or complete the sword. The sword doesn't really feel worth it, but it definitely doesn't feel worth $17. But if you must, then get him. Otherwise, wait for a clearance. But that's my look at Legacy Core Iguanus and Core Shitrod. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.